Hi and welcome back to the Academy of Bel Canto. My name is Joseph Cianciulli, and as always, I am the founder of the Academy of Bel Canto and the host of the Mystery Bel Canto podcast. We are talking about low laryngeal singing today. So when we talk about low laryngeal singing, what are we talking about? We're talking about the pushing down or holding down of the larynx for some type of acoustic effect. A lot of this is labeled as operatic vocal training, but it is not tied to the Bel Canto training of old. So let's be very, very clear. When we talk about getting the larynx down and holding it down, I don't really have a problem if as you know, with any other aspect of modern voice training, people are saying, oh yes, this is a part of the modern schools, this is what we teach. But when you say, oh, this is what the older singers were doing, this is how they created an operatic sound, this is how they created a classical sound, that is not accurate at all. So the low larynx singing is not within the Bel Canto mindset. Even the Garcia II treatise, which I think the son was not the true teacher, I think it was the father. Regardless, he did glean a lot of information. He tried to validate a lot of that information medically and scientifically for the rising expectation that society had regarding pretty much everything within the sciences, that it had to be validated scientifically, and if it was validated scientifically, that gave credence to the validity of the approach. However, we do have the simple fact that the singers at that time sound very different than they do today. They had more flexibility, more longevity in their voice, more vibrancy in the voice. They were able to sing with that same vibrancy throughout their career. But the approach was very, very different than today's approach to the voice. Not to say that today's is necessarily wrong, but it is not a Bel Canto approach. So as always, my problem is not necessarily that we have deviated from the Bel Canto approach to voice, because this approach that we have today was being used at that time. It just was not predominantly used to build voices for the stage, or at least they were not getting the recognition that the same recognition that those singers like Bonci, like De Lucia were getting on the stage, like Caruso. So when we talk about the low larynx singing, what are we exactly talking about? Again, it's the through the breath. Oftentimes the singers are taught through a yawn position to yawn, and then you look and see the larynx is dropping when you yawn. Yeah, the larynx moves. For the men, you see the Adam's apple descent. And then it's the holding, oftentimes, of that position. Okay. So what I had said regarding Garcia II had even said in his treatise, the larynx must be free to move up and down at will. That doesn't sound to me like it means that you force the larynx down. Now, a lot of what we see here in today's approach to the voice is an attempt to achieve freedom in the full vocal range. So when I hear people saying, oh, I have to use the low larynx, it's typically in combination with the complaint that when I don't use it, my upper voice kind of either thins out, or I don't have the vibrancy in my upper voice, or it squeezes, it tightens, it feels uncomfortable. That's not what's allowing the freedom. Okay, so understand what's happening. When you muscle in the pharynx, and when you push the larynx down, what you're really doing is you're isolating away from muscular tension that you're feeling when you don't do that, and you're grabbing. Yeah. So as you go up in your vocal ranges, you just go ah. Even if you go in the upper voice in the head register, ah. Yeah, it starts to grab and squeeze. You feel muscles get involved. So when you add space, naturally the folds will be able to do what they do naturally more easily, which is come together and then begin to vibrate. Yes, because of as speech pathologists would say, because of the aerodynamic properties of the folds, they start to come together and move, and when they move, they release resonance. Yes, but this can all be achieved and was achieved within the bel canto training without that low larynx manipulation, without the muscling in the pharynx, within the back of the mouth. Okay, so how did they do this? They did this through, one, the tool of Cuperto, and two, understanding the very, very simple, simple concept of allowing the folds to come together naturally before phonation. Meaning, if you say uh-oh, just before uh-oh, everything is closed. Now, you don't muscle it closed, you don't squeeze or hold things closed, but before you start singing, everything is closed. It's in a closed position. Now, what about when we have open vowels? Well, we used the coup de glotte. That's what they applied. Coup de glotte was for using the posture through allowing the belly to move in with energy, in the beginning at least. In the end, you can use just the posture to open the folds. But it was to open the folds through the posture without having to squeeze or muscle. And then on the vowels, you can just make sure or ensure that before you start at the onset, the folds are closed. So if I sing Sel mio nome, many teachers are teaching to leak breath, meaning for me, it means they start with breath. Okay, and why is this a problem? Well, it was validated through Dr. Barbara Mathis's research that when you start with breath, knowing that the folds have to come together in order to create sound. Before they start vibrating, they have to come to a closure. If you start breath, you're starting from an open position. And then you're starting from that open position to create sound. Okay, so what does it do? It causes the folds to slap together. Okay, and that friction, that abrasive action, over time will fatigue the folds. Okay, so we're going to talk in a later video, I think the next video, about coup de glotte and how it is used to essentially build a closer connection before and during phonation. But when you sing something like Sel mio nome, you have to start from closure first. But then you can't get involved. You can't hold the closure there. The folds have to learn on their own how to hold a closer proximity, a closer position as they're vibrating, and not a wider position or a more relaxed position. So, Sel mio nome saper voi bramate, dal mio labbro il mio nome ascoltate. So when you start the phrase, really anytime you have an opportunity to take a breath, you should not be concerned with muscling pharyngeal space. You should not be concerned with pushing the larynx down. Okay? You should not be concerned with driving sound. You have to be concerned with the quality of the onset. Yes, are you starting through posture to start sound, or are you squeezing the folds together? Because again, when you squeeze the folds together, you're only creating muscular tension that, because everything is interconnected, when you start with tension here, or here, or here, or here, it will eventually work its way either spontaneously or over time into the folds, into the connection. And this is really what we're dealing with when we talk about, the full spectrum of the vocal range. When singers have an issue with their tops or their bottoms, it's most of the time it's the top. But when they have an issue with their upper voice, it's because they've encouraged tension in the middle voice. Okay, and typically it's because the middle voice is closer to where we speak, so there's a little bit more natural connection to the voice. And because of that, you get a little more sound. So then they try and take that up into the upper range, and they've built so much muscular tension that the folds can't act appropriately the way they do naturally. When you hear vibrato, the vibrato it's a natural flutter because the folds are efficiently working, meaning they're coming together and breath and sound are working together to start that complete release of resonance. And therefore, the byproduct is vibrato. But the singer can't get involved with vibrato like we've talked about before. They have to just allow it to happen. Now, of course, with solfiato, when you're on the breath, there's less vibrato because you're following the breath out as opposed to letting or being firmly rooted in that simple connection of everything moving out together. So when you move up, remember, the folds, if you didn't have your head, the folds would just sound like a buzz. Yes? But when you have your head, it allows for the sound to travel through something, which acoustically will give a certain sound to the listener. So you really can only get involved with the posture, meaning the posture of the vowel. You can't get involved with the posture or with what's being created at the level of the folds, because once it's created, all you can do is get involved and it'll pull it back. Yeah, you can't really get involved to manipulate it when it's out. I see a lot of teachers saying, oh, change the vowel to this or change the vowel to that. Try doing this, but it's all already, the sound is already out when they're encouraging those things. You can't do anything. It happens from the very simple onset, the simple closure of the folds. So again, when I start say il mio nome, I have a consonant to start. I have sei. But if you leak air, the folds don't learn to start with that natural vibration, that natural vibrato, that natural release right away. That's why it's really inconsequential what you do with this yawning method. It's only to imitate what these older singers were able to do without that. Se il mio nome saper voi bramate dal mio labbro il mio nome. It's all happening here. There's a simple connection, very subtle connection you feel between the chest and the front of the teeth. Yes, and it doesn't happen from doing anything. It happens from allowing things to work the way they're supposed to, the way they naturally do, without you getting involved. So I hope this makes a little bit more sense. Within the Bel Canto mindset, we do not push the larynx down. We do not encourage any muscling or any manipulation above the level of the folds. When you push the folds or the larynx down, it's only in the long term going to get in your way. A lot of what I hear with singers is they'll hear these social media influencers say things like, oh, try to drive it this way, or try to feel the belt, or they'll give these little so-called secrets to open up doors for them. And some of them do. And you see some of the comments and they say, oh my gosh, you've flipped the switch that I've always, needed to have flipped regarding, encouraging freedom in my voice. And then a couple weeks later, they're asking the same questions. Well, what happens if this happens? What happens if my upper voice is starting to get tight or it's starting to get tired? It's because when you manipulate, it is always going to lead you back to asking more and more questions to get some clarification, because it's not in line with truth. It's not in line with the natural coordination that the body does without you getting involved. So when we talk about low larynx singing, it's important to understand, one, it is not Bel Canto. It is not tied to the Bel Canto schools of old. It is not tied to the Bel Canto training of the singers that came out of those schools. And low larynx singing will only get in your way in the long run. Simple or freedom in the full spectrum of your range comes from understanding that you have to build a connection to the folds coming at the beginning of the phrase to a simple and unmuscled closure. Yes, when I say unmuscled, yes, there are involuntary muscles that get involved, but you're not actively involved in pushing them together and then allowing release of resonance from that closed place without getting involved after the sound is already released. So as always, if you would like to learn more or you have more questions, reach out to us at vocalmastery1@gmail.com. We have information for on our books, our online courses, as well as our private lessons, our workshops, and many more things at academybelcanto.com. But we will see you for your next excerpt.